In Disney's Pinocchio, a puppet was promised that if he was a good boy and never told any fibs, he would eventually earn the right to become a real boy. But since when have honesty, innocence, and obedience been the pillars of human nature? Lies of P takes the concept of Pinocchio in a much more interesting and accurate direction, in my opinion. Puppets are like robots, and they are governed by a group of rules like Asimov's 3 laws, where they cannot harm humans, and in this case cannot tell lies. But if the ability to lie is among the things that separates humans from puppets, then what happens when a puppet gains that ability? Wouldn't lying, not telling the truth, bring it closer to becoming human? Lies of P explores this question in its narrative about a city torn asunder by rampaging puppets who have all mysteriously gone berserk and started murdering people. It's a Souls-like game, which means you've got your methodical combat and invincible rolling and enemies respawning when you die. The most direct comparison is to Bloodborne, but there are Sekiro elements too, like timing your blocks perfectly to avoid chip damage and build your enemy's stagger meter. When you see a white outline on an enemy's HP bar, you can charge attack them or use certain special weapon attacks to put them in visceral attack state, or fatal attack as this game calls it, where you can then walk up and land a critical blow. I want to get some very definitive statements of opinion out of the way right now, just so there's absolutely no confusion or lingering doubt, because people are criminally underselling this game. Lies of P is a fucking masterpiece. This is the best Souls-like game I've ever played. When you get into its systems, it adds so much to the formula that writing it off as a clone is borderline offensive. It is a clone, but it's much more than that, so that word shouldn't be used with a negative connotation, especially when there are plenty of clones that iterate on their inspirations to create something that can stand equal to or surpass them. I'll even take it a step further than some other enjoyers of this game will, because where they like to stop Lies of P in its tracks in their minds before it reaches the quality of From Software's own catalog, I have no such loyal allegiance. I don't put From Software games on some unreachable pedestal. I'm a fan of the genre more than I am of who made it. Is Lies of P better than Dark Souls? Yes. Is it better than Dark Souls 2? Yes. Is it better than Dark Souls 3? Yes. Is it better than Bloodborne, its most direct inspiration? Yes, especially because Bloodborne is still chugging along at 30 FPS on an old console. Is it better than Sekiro? Yes. Is it better than Elden Ring? Yes, because this game isn't set in an open world that exists to put artificial distance between you and the content, and still manages to be almost 30 hours of primo quality action if the bosses don't lay your ass out for too long. I don't say this to create controversy or start an argument of which Souls games are better than others. I say it to cement Lies of P's reputation as a game that deserves to be in the conversation. If you are a Souls fan, this game should have your attention. This is not some bullshit 6 or 7 out of 10 that exists because the devs wanted a piece of the Souls-like pie and ended up only half baking it. This is the real deal. They've actually surpassed their inspirations. They've made great interconnected areas with top-tier level design. The shortcuts in particular are the best the genre has to offer, each area having multiple instances of doors to unlock from the other side or ladders to knock down that perfectly streamline the process of trekking from the checkpoint to eventually the boss, and cause immense satisfaction when you unlock them in a tough or long area. There's only one boss in this game who has an annoying run back, where you have to sprint like 5 football field lengths through giant mutant scorpion panthers to get back there, and it fucking sucks. It's honestly the only sour spot I had in the entire playthrough, and if you've played it, you know what I'm talking about. Everywhere else was a delight, where you'd run for no more than maybe 10 seconds to get back to the boss area. Speaking of bosses, the ones in Lies of P are almost exclusively terrific. The scrapped Watchman from the demo is the most derivative-looking one. Like, it's super clear which Bloodborne boss inspired it, but once you actually fight it, the moves are completely different, and every other boss is pretty original. And as for difficulty, I really don't understand the people who say this game is too hard, specifically the Souls game veterans who are saying that. You guys beat Ishin the Sword Saint from Sekiro, and Lies of P is too hard? You guys beat Elden Ring's Malenia, Dark Souls 3's Sister Freed, and Slave Knight Gale, but Lies of P is too hard? There's not a single boss in this game that comes close to that difficulty. I can't even beat Sekiro, and I beat every boss in Lies of P in less than 10 tries, usually 3 or 4 each. I'm not that good at these games. I have awful reaction time, and bosses that slow down and speed up their swings at random intervals like there's a toddler playing with a TV remote completely wreck my shit. but Lies of P is super learnable. Even the two-phase bosses, which in the latter half of the game are basically all that exist, will flatten you your first couple attempts, and you'll think to yourself, oh my god, how am I going to learn all these attacks? But then fast forward a few attempts later, and you'll be perfect blocking entire sequences and seizing openings like a pro. If you remember Lady Maria from Bloodborne, that's the general difficulty I'd put most of the later bosses at, and their first phases can usually be slept through after you try them enough times. So let's get to the game graph, where I'll be judging story, graphics, mechanics, and fun as separate categories before we give everything an overall score at the end. Starting with story, Lies of P has a great one. They actually tell you what's happening. It's amazing to me that some FromSoft fans don't like that. They actually get mad if you try to tell them a story, instead of leaving them breadcrumbs and putting YouTube links in your item descriptions. The motivations of Geppetto and other characters you meet in this game are compelling, and the overall narrative remains mysterious until the end. It's hard to tell if you're doing the right thing with some of the choices you can make, like letting someone live longer and more painfully with a disease, or choosing to cure them, which will shorten their lives but take away their pain. You have side quests with side characters whose stories you can see to the end, and the revelations are worthwhile and rewarding. The game apparently has multiple endings, and New Game Plus provides a cohesive way to experience them. I haven't started New Game Plus yet, but I'm excited to when I have time. The apocalyptic world of a city ravaged by puppets is just a neat place to be in, and the teaser of future content that takes place during the end credits is actually hype as hell. It's like the end of a Marvel movie, teasing a new character getting added to the universe, and the implications for this one are huge. I'm giving story a 95. The graphics are terrific. It runs super smooth on PC. I'm not someone who will catch himself staring at a vista or anything in any game, but all the animations are well done and everything looks high tier. If they ever remastered Bloodborne, I would want it to look like this. I'll give graphics a 90. The mechanics, my god, there are so many, both big and small, that help elevate this game above its competition and give it an identity to call its own. Starting with the weapon crafting, you'll get a very large assortment of weapons as you progress, and you can detach the blades from the handles and put them on different handles to give your blade a different moveset. As an example, when you get the fire axe, you get the fire axe blade and the fire axe handle. If you took a different blade and put it on the fire axe handle, that blade would inherit the fire axe's moveset, while the fire axe blade could go on a different handle and inherit the moveset and stat scaling of that handle. Handles determine moveset and scaling, blades determine damage and attack speed, and blades are what you reinforce to upgrade them. You can do silly shit, like putting a giant saw blade on a dagger handle to turn it into a giant dagger, but you also have to keep in mind that different blades have different damage type proficiencies. That saw blade might be good at slashing, but bad at thrusting, which is what a dagger would do, and could lose damage in the process. The variety is tremendous though, and you also have boss weapons that can't be detached, but have very unique movesets and properties, like a scythe that can turn into a whip, or a trident that has a chance to land critical hits on any attack. You've got the best weaponry of any Souls game at your disposal here, and countless hours of experimentation to undergo if you want to find the best pairings. Did I mention blades and handles each have their own unique special attack too, called Fable Arts? These can be anything from a special parry, to a giant AoE slash, to a Buster Sword blade beam, and you can activate them if your blue Fable Art meter has enough charges. One mechanic I really like is that your fuel cells, the items you use to heal mid-battle, can recharge when you run out of them by landing hits. So if you're in a situation where you're finally starting to figure out a boss, but you've run out of heals, you can still claw your way back into the fight and sustain yourself if you can land enough attacks without getting hit too hard. You can only gain one fuel cell at a time this way, and you have to use it before you can gain another, but it's a great way to ratchet up tension and make you feel like you still have a fighting chance at a time when you would have otherwise just said GG next attempt. There's even a skill tree. As you go through the game, you can find quartz and use it to unlock powerful abilities of your choosing from a list, and it's got unique functionality. You spend the quartz on accumulated buffs to unlock a certain ability, so like the ability to have one extra fuel cell might have 2 slots in it, and that you first fill with other potential bonuses you can choose, like enemies being in their stagger window for longer, or increased fatal attack damage, and then when you fill both slots with those buffs, you unlock that extra fuel cell. It's a great system on top of the usual Souls-like stat gains from leveling, and you won't even half finish it by the time the credits roll, which gives you more incentive to do New Game Plus and collect more quartz. This game has tons of flourishes and little tweaks that just make the gameplay experience that much smoother. Too many to mention. If there was a single problem, it would be that some of them aren't very evident, like the boss's HP regen mechanic that I wouldn't have ever even noticed if a video I watched didn't point it out to me. Basically, as you damage bosses, there will be a faded bar that accumulates from where their HP is currently at, to how much HP they can regain if you leave them alone for a while. It encourages aggressive play rather than running around landing stray hits every 30 seconds, but I didn't even know it was a thing, and I have no idea if it affected any of my attempts. If you land a visceral attack, it will delete the boss's gainable HP to that point so they can't regenerate past it. It's a fine mechanic to dissuade people from being pansies, it's just not very obvious. One other thing that could maybe provide a better experience would be if the timing range for perfect blocks was increased by literally like a single frame or two. It's really tight, you've got to be dead on, and while it's something you'll eventually get used to, I don't think the game would be worse off for being a little more lenient in that area. If you perfect block an enemy or even a boss enough times, their weapon will actually break for the rest of the fight, decreasing their damage and range, which is a big boon and a satisfying one to go for, but they're still dangerous, so don't get complacent. I think it only works on weapons. I don't think you can break somebody's fists or their tongue or some shit, but who knows. Enemies have red attacks called Fury attacks that have to be either perfect blocked or ran away from because dodges don't have invincibility frames on those attacks. It's a very important thing to know, and I've seen tons of misinformation about this game on Twitter that people spread like wildfire to justify whatever complaints they have. People said dodging has barely any iframes. That's straight up false. It has plenty. You just can't dodge through the red attacks. People said the combat is clunky. I mean, that's a matter of opinion, but I have absolutely no idea why anyone would think that. Your character runs a bit slower, and it's noticeable when trekking through large expanses, but that's about it. Don't let ignorant bait engagement tweets inform your opinion of this game. You can try it on Game Pass for free like I did, or spend $60 that it absolutely deserves. Regardless, I'm giving mechanics a 95. Now for fun. Is Lies of P fun? Well, it's the most fun Souls game I've ever played, and it didn't take long to become that. Most Souls games for me are games that I don't enjoy until I get good at them. Being laid out by enemies and bosses because you don't know the attacks yet is annoying, but Lies of P's defensive options help keep the scales from tipping too far in the opponent's favor. There's the fuel cell regeneration thing I talked about that can always help you cling to the fight. There's also the fact that blocking attacks gives you a rally mechanic similar to Bloodborne, where you can then go on the offensive and recover some of the HP you lost while blocking. This makes going for perfect block strings less punishing if you miss a couple while still at least guarding. You can also use NPC summons for bosses, though I didn't in my playthrough. Typically you never know when the enemy's going to randomly turn around and target you instead of the summon, or if you get cleaved by a wide attack that wasn't even aiming at you, but I imagine it's more helpful than not if you're really struggling on something. The more I played Lies of P, the more fun it got. The bosses start to get crazy halfway through, but nothing egregious. Some of the elite enemies that don't respawn when you kill them and have special drops are absolute bitches, but it's not the worst thing in the world, and anything that drops a quartz is worth banging your head against for a few tries. This game knows what's annoying and will compensate you fairly for time spent enduring it. All Souls and Souls-like games have a fun to frustration ratio. How much time are you spending having unabashed fun, and how much time are you spending being upset at the game or the situation you're in? For some comparison, for me, Bloodborne was like 70-30 fun to frustration, Dark Souls 3 was 60-40, Elden Ring was 50-50, and Lies of P is 90-10. The only annoying things in it are certain enemy attack patterns before you internalize them, and then a couple of bullshit traps where there's an item on a thin ledge or something and you walk out there to pick it up and get immediately shot off screen by some asshole in hiding who knocks you off and makes you plummet to your demise. Haha, good one. And then there's that mile-long run back I mentioned before, which is the only actual time I was disappointed in the game. I was like, you guys did everything else right, but you can't put another checkpoint by this boss door. It doesn't help that the boss in question is a gimmick fight that basically requires you to land every perfect block with flawless execution because he only takes real damage when you stagger him. There were a decent amount of long runbacks cursing the desert and the devs who made it, but I'm still giving fun a 95. So now we come to our overall score, which takes the previous scores into account but ultimately weighs different categories differently, and adds or subtracts some bonus points based on whatever I feel like in the moment. I'm giving Lies of P a 96 out of 100. It's so good. I don't like New Game Plus in Souls games, but I want a New Game Plus this game. I want to do different builds and mix and match my weapons and pick different dialogue choices while laying waste to puppets and zombies and humans alike. This is how you make a clone. Well, that's going to do it for this review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Watch all my other videos that are clones of this one, and I'll see you guys next time.